Reese, Dunbar, Nelson, Brooks, DeVazio on the webinar. And we have to thank many of our representatives on the webinar that were owners of business in past and still. And we thank other elected officials in our county for challenging and communicating with the governor and state departments to open businesses and soon as possible, and also to stay safe and healthy. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney. She's the membership director of the chamber, and she is going to be the host of the webinar. Here's to you, Courtney.
Thanks, Chad. And thank you to our representatives on the meeting today, Mike Reese, George Dunbar, Eric Nelson, Bob Brooks, and Eric DeVanzo. Just a few housekeeping rules for everyone who's on the call here. We do have a lot of participants. I believe we have about 100 or so. So we are going to keep everyone muted and everyone's video off except for the representatives and Chad and myself. The representatives are gonna talk to you briefly and then field some questions. So if you have a question that you would like to pose to the representatives, please utilize the chat box, and I will be going through those questions and giving them to the reps. The chat box is at the bottom of your screen in the black area. You can just click in there and send the question privately to myself, and I will go through those once the state reps are done and field the questions for them. We are recording this meeting today. If anyone would like a copy of it, we can get that to you afterwards. So just let me know. You can email me and I'll give you all of that information at the end of the meeting. So as Chad said, thank you all for being on the call. I hope you, your loved ones, your family, your employees are all safe and healthy. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike Reese, our state rep, Mike Reese from District 59, to get things started.
All right, thank you, Courtney. First, I want to thank the chamber for putting this together, and certainly want to thank Courtney and Chad for all the work you've been doing. You guys have been great partners on many issues, so thank you for that. And of course, all the members who are taking time out of their day to spend a little bit of time with us and talk about what's going on in Harrisburg. Thank you for that. So my job is to kind of go over the strategy, the House Republican strategy in getting Pennsylvania's economy back open, up and running in a safe way. And let me start by saying this. We have been in constant communication with the administration, with the governor's office. We have been communicating what we're hearing back in our districts to the administration. And for the most part, they've been communicating with us. Perhaps not as timely as we want, but they have been somewhat open with us on what they're doing. You know, early on when this was sort of getting rolled out in the first part of March, we all agreed that, look, this was a very dangerous situation, and we had to make sure that our folks were going to be safe. And I think most of us bought into the idea of buying some time, seeing how this played out, and frankly, making sure that our hospital systems were ready for a surge of patients, to make sure that they had the equipment that they needed. And of course, you know, that we had enough beds for those who were going to get sick. We did that in 10 or 15 days. We did that, and of course, our hospital systems are ready to deal with any COVID-19 patients that might come to their door. And once we got past that first part, we started having conversations with the administration about opening the economy back up and making sure that we had a viable economy after this was said and done. And we were met with resistance, frankly. And so we decided our job was to speak with our legislative voice. That's how we represent our constituents. We introduce bills, we run those bills on the House floor, we put them on the governor's desk. And we started that with Senate Bill 613. And just in general, because I don't have a whole lot of time, Senate Bill 613 would have essentially opened up Pennsylvania's economy following the CDC guidelines. Basically, we were saying, look, if you can be safe with your employees and of course your customers, and go back to work, we need to start moving forward. And unfortunately, we passed it out of the House, the Senate passed it, and unfortunately the governor vetoed that bill. So our strategy from then on was, okay, we're gonna break out individual industries, and we're gonna start running bills dealing with individual industries to get them back up and running. So we ran a real estate bill, we ran a construction bill, auto sales bill, a greenhouse bill, many bills dealing with specific industries. And every time we did that, the administration would react and slowly start to open up certain parts of the economy. So that's been our approach. It's not exactly what we want to do. It's not how we want to open the economy back up, but that's what we've been working on. And at the end of the day, I think we recognize that most Pennsylvanians want to provide for their families, and they want to make sure that people are safe. They just want to get back to work. So that's what we've been doing. And if it's okay, I think it's my responsibility to turn it over to our appropriations expert, the vice chairman of the House Republican Appropriations Committee, is our friend George Dunbar.
Thanks, Mike. I don't have a good segue from Mike into the area that he asked me to touch on, which is our finances and our budgets. I'll just go right into it. I'm sure everybody's heard that Pennsylvania revenue collections were $2.1 billion short in April, which is like 50% of what we needed to be. It's kind of scary. But really, when you get down to it and drill through it, it's about 400 to 500 million of the shortfall is directly related to COVID and the pandemic. The other shortfall is because we deferred collection of taxes until July for corporate taxes and individual taxes. So, and there's some good news there, not a whole lot, but some good news. The one issue of what was collected that was not collected from COVID is personal income tax withholding. The withholding was $104 million short, which translates into about $3.8 billion worth of wages that weren't paid out, that normally are paid out. For Westmoreland County, the number's about $100 million of wages that weren't paid out that would normally be paid out. So that's affected all of you individually. What the federal government did pass is the CARES Act, the Payroll Protection Act, which many of you, I think, probably have tried to take advantage of. And the Payroll Protection Act, as long as you continue to pay employees, the federal government will loan you money, and then the loan will eventually transition into a grant. Just one word of warning: in Pennsylvania, we have concerns about a loan transitioning to a grant is a taxable transaction. So I put an amendment on a bill to make it non-taxable, as well as introduced it as a standalone bill, which will be running when we get back next week or week after next, to protect everybody there from having Pennsylvania taxes. But I also want to have one warning out to everybody as well, is the federal government has had some discussions about the Payroll Protection Act of the non-deductibility of some of those expenditures. So you all need to be very careful. I mean, I know they're talking about it right now. The IRS put out notice that they did not want to allow deductions for these expenditures. The AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, are fighting back. So I just want to make sure all of you that have taken advantage of the payroll protection plan to check the tax status of that. That's, I guess it's about my minute or 2 minutes. So I will transition on to Representative Nelson.
Great, thank you, George. And again, thank you to the chamber members who were able to make this call. We have an ongoing line of communication with both our county commissioners, Chad, the Economic Development Corp, and we have to thank Courtney and Tricia for their help in putting this call together. Part of my role in today's meeting is to touch on some of what it is to be yellow. And so if your screen is coming up, everybody by now has heard that, Westmoreland County is going to be entering into the yellow phase starting the 15th. So officially, what that's going to mean is that if you have the ability to still telecommute within the governor's plan, and I recognize there's a lot of controversy and some frustrations about the plan itself, but this slower rollout would mean if you have the ability to still work remotely or conduct remote operations, they're encouraging you to do so. And then if you have a business that's going to have in-person operations, they're wanting us to follow our business safety guidelines or those CDC guidelines. And one of the action items that we'll do from today is forward to the chamber that they can forward out some of the information on business guidelines that have been shared with our office. Also, the statewide chamber has a link that has some good.
Wow, first time Eric's ever been quiet.
A lot of people will begin to use childcare, and they have their own specific and individual guidance. And I don't necessarily know that there's going to be a whole lot of prisoner involvement with those individuals on the call, but there's still going to be our senior facilities and our prisons are still going to have some specific safety guidelines they're getting into. What is good about the world of the yellow is business is going to begin to start again using these CDC guidelines, social distancing, controlled numbers within the stores themselves. Not all businesses are going to be allowed to open in this yellow stage, but people will begin to move around again. 25 or less is kind of that threshold that they're talking about. And in-person retail, that's a big element of it, so we're gonna be able to start to shop at some of our small and local businesses again, again with outside recreation coming online. And I think, Representative Brooks is gonna touch on that a little bit more. Right now, yellow does not mean everything, which the members of our delegation have been working very hard and working with the administration to help to open up hair salons and dentists. There were some pre-questions for the call that right now they are not yet allowed to operate, and there are bills to help pressure that to move it forward. Hotels are allowed to be in operations. And as far as for some of those questions of when in the green phase, there really hasn't been a set date for that. I did think it was timely that the governor extended into the beginning of June because that brought his stay-at-home orders in sync with the initial emergency declaration. So there is not a clear date-driven path to when we'd be to green, but yellow is a good first step starting next week. With that, I'll turn it.
You guys froze. You guys waiting on me? I lost the last couple minutes.
I think
No,
we're
that's
going to
Representative Brooks is going to touch on.
Okay, cool.
Representative Brooks. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I'm unmuted, and my picture's unmuted, but you don't have me on.
I can see you.
We can see you and hear you.
Yeah,
All right,
you're
well,
good.
great. I keep seeing you where I saw all the other people before. So let me just say, this has been a good week. Wednesday was Nurses Day, and my staff delivered 40 dozen of donuts and cookies to all the senior facilities in our area. Thursday was National Day of Prayer, and the Trail Scouts had the trails marked in Murraysville, the rails to trails, with all these different stations. It was really great. And today, Friday, my Rotary and my staff had a food collection for the food bank. We collected over 6 vans full of food, and people threw $20 in as they went by. We collected $3,600 of food, of money for them at the same time. And of course, as you all heard at 2 o'clock, we became yellow. So it's actually been a pretty good week. One of the things Eric mentioned that I want to correct is dentists are allowed. If they are open, there was a special memo put out today by the governor that said It used to be dentists were there like hospitals for special surgery. Now, hospitals are elective and so are dentists. So dentist offices are open throughout the state, even in the red, for elective. And I take that to mean, of course, it's if you have your protection equipment, the right gowns, the right masks. But I take that to also mean that the cleanings and everything to take care of your well-being in the dentist's office is open. So I pass it on to all my friends that are dentists. Also, home sales, as you know, were passed so that you can sell homes, you can actually have visitations in houses and all that. You just can't have open house where they could be a large group of people going through. But in-person contact can still happen. I do want to also make sure, if you can see me, make sure that every guy knows that. And prepare yourself and make sure this Sunday.
Thanks
Happy
for the
Mother's Day.
reminder.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say a couple of the closed facilities. Of course, I own a indoor recreation facility, and that is still closed. Tennis clubs, racquetball, fitness, if they're indoors, they're closed. If they're outdoors, they're open. So that's the key. So, I'm thinking of just throwing all my doors open and moving in that direction. But to tell you the truth, I don't understand why tennis facilities, racket clubs, fitness clubs are closed, because they can all, with distancing, do these things safely. And so I will do everything within the next couple of weeks to make sure that when we get to be yellow, that's also something that could be there. So anyway, those are that. But what it does say is if you're outdoors and you can stay in groups of roughly 25 or under, then you can do outdoor recreation. And to me, that says the FRAA and all the little league associations are open. And so this is a time when now we should be looking at all our planning for the youth and starting our baseball programs and doing them with distancing and doing them with care. But this is the time for that to begin. It is perfect for our kids. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Eric.
Thanks, Bob. I also want to thank the chamber as well, all the members that are participating today. What I want to talk about today is I had a lot of restaurant owners, bar owners, BFWs reach out to me with the renewal of the liquor license. With them not being open, they are struggling to come up with this fee at this time. I have spoke with the Republican chairman of the Liquor Control about this issue. Legislation is being worked on to possibly extend the due date and possibly also offer some assistance. We do not have all the specifics at this time. It is still in the works. Also with the VFWs, the legions and the social clubs, gun clubs, etc., that have the small game of chance license, House Bill 777 will be introduced at some point. It's introduced. We will be voting on it in the upcoming session. What this does is these clubs that have the small game of chance license, as of right now, you have to donate 60% back to the community. This would allow those groups to keep that money for day-to-day operating expenses. They would just ask that that money be documented and what it was spent on. Now, this doesn't make it mandatory that you have to keep that money. If those clubs are doing well and they still want to donate to the local organizations, that's still an option. And this would be good from 1 year. So from 1 year from the time it's signed, we would be good to go with that. And with that, that's, I believe, all I have. Since all these guys took extra, I cut it short.
Thank you all very much. So we're going to get started. I do have some questions rolling in for you guys already. One thing, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention this, but when you are sending a question to me, if you could please put what your business is or what industry you're in, so we know who we're speaking to and you know what the question is pertaining to. So I'm going to start off, gentlemen, with our first question, and this is from Don Pallone. He's in the construction industry. His question is, how can we get new housing a jump start, like reducing some of the needless requirements that do not add any value to a new home construction?
Hey, George, you want this one since you used to work in that industry?
I'm not exactly sure. Can you repeat that, Courtney? What requirements is he referring to?
I don't know. It just says, how can we get new housing a jump start, like reducing some of the needless requirements that do not add any value to new home construction?
I'm really not sure what he's asking, to be honest with you. Go ahead, Eric, if you know.
I'm just going to take a shot at that, and there has been some discussion. I think, you know, a lot of areas in the state, we have rolled back some of the overly burdensome restrictions and requirements as there's been more pressure. And so there is some dialogue at taking a look, is this an opportunity where we can maybe clear the field, specifically with the zoning side. I haven't heard a lot of discussions in that area, but not that, I mean, that's always going on, that battle back and forth between the code inspectors and the construction industry itself. So unfortunately, Dawn, I haven't seen right now, so much effort is COVID specific and helping from an employer side of things. There is discussion about, if we've been able to roll something back, can we keep it? Because if we know we don't need it now, do we have to put it back in later? That's really the best I can do for that answer right now.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate that. So our next question is coming from Jay Wallace, and he is with the Greensburg Country Club. His question is, with going into yellow, how does that affect private clubs, swimming pools, the regulations and CDC guidelines? When do you think we can officially open? And he states that he knows a lot of public pools are not opening this year.
I could just briefly say, I know under yellow, you're still not going to be able to open the pool. And under green, which I don't know how long it's going to take to get to green, that's going to be the first opportunity that something like that can actually take place. As far as the country club, there's still going to be restrictions as far as until they get to green, they're going to have restrictions on opening up the country club as well.
Thank you, George. Hopefully, Jay, that helps you.
I don't think it helped Jay at all, but
well, maybe it gave him a little bit of insight. Let's see. Our next question is from Jay Bell. He is the owner of a winery, but he is also asking this question from his position as a board member on the YMCA. And his question is, since daycare is opening, will summer day camps be included in this program opening? Specifically, our YMCA employs many day camp employees, and I feel that it is similar, if not the same, as daycare. Parents depend on sending their older kids there while they are at work in the summer months.
I can go ahead. I'll try to take a stab at that. Hello, Jay. And there's a lot of uncharted water, you know, so I think the paradigm owners and that organizations should look to incur is, how can they ensure and provide, you know, safe environments for the activities that they may be considering? Because, you know, you could say, if we're able to have a childcare, then maybe that means we're able to have a summer camp, but the restrictions and the disinfectants, the hygiene practices, some of that social distancing, I think are all still going to need to be considered, because just as many business owners are going to be able to look to operate again, they still have to ensure, they have liability issues and concerns, and they have to look at how those, in this case, it's going to be families, are going to feel comfortable in an indoor environment versus an outdoor. If it's an indoor activity right now in yellow, I think that's going to be it's going to be a trickier thing. Anything that's going to be above that, those larger numbers, which sometimes those summer programs are dealing with larger amounts of kids. Outdoor, I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility. And again, we don't know when green is coming, but that's moving forward, it's going to change a lot of things. But I would almost encourage our business owners and our organizations that if there's not a line item, it's more, hey, how can we come up with a way to ensure this is safe for our communities? Because that's really the prime goal here, is that we want to protect. A lot of kids have grandparents as their primary caregivers. And so we have to be mindful that as they come in, we don't want to have a spike in cases, which is going to cause everything to go back to red.
And I think this is like a microcosm, these first few questions of what we've been going through. The governor has been very short on details on everything, and we're left to guess quite a bit. And it's not that we don't know, we read everything that there is out there, but a lot of times there's no guidance for a lot of these issues. I do understand that the governor has a FAQ, a frequently asked question sheet on his website, which I just found out about today. I haven't had a chance to look at it, of what can transpire under yellow. So hopefully we will read through that. And if anybody here, Chad, or any of your people have questions at the end that we haven't been able to answer, if you want to keep the list, and we'll get in.
Yes, we will send that to you.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. So the next question is coming from Rob Norton. And he asked me a question here, but then he's, since you guys already cleared up, his question is on the time frame for moving to the green phase. And the question has been adjusted to ask, do we know what steps will need to be taken to get to the green phase, and what the requirements are to preempt those steps?
I'll take a crack at that, Courtney. Part of the problem that we've had in the General Assembly is it seems like the goalpost just keeps on moving. So, a big point of discussion for the governor in recent weeks has been testing. And, he had mentioned the fact that, we can't go green, we can't fully open up Pennsylvania's economy back to some sense of normal until we have a robust testing system in place. So, of course, we had some lengthy debates on the House floor. We have looked to amend Representative John Lawrence's bill dealing with a very specific issue to include testing, or at least a plan for testing. And we got pushback from the administration on that and from the other side of the aisle. So, I think some of our frustration on this side is every time we think we know where we're going with this, the goal changes. And so, I think you're going to see the governor talk about testing from here on out and looking for some sort of data that will determine, okay, we're safe to open up. I'll be honest with you, I'm very skeptical of that. I think ultimately the only way we address all the issues that have been discussed today is by having Pennsylvania up and running and frankly, people going back to work. So, I think you're going to see a continued push from our side.
This is from Charlie Fredrickson, and it's just a little bit more clarification on the large groups and groups of 25. Is that number of people in groups, is that only outside, or could it be large groups inside if it's like a large auditorium, is his question.
And Charlie, I know you're pretty active in the Henfield play, and the question of some of those concerts and events. I think my understanding, and correct me guys with your perspective, but the 25 or less is not exclusive to outside. So if you have a large space, you may be able to participate, but it does not get into detail about, you know, how social distance seating and a lot of those other things that are under play. The same thing with as schools are looking at trying to plan graduation. So as my understanding, and anybody correct me with your perspective, 25 or less is inside. There's a lot more flexibility for outside.
Thank you, Eric. So we're going to move on. Jim Smith from the EGC has a question. He says the COVID Working Capital Access Fund was a great success, but there is still a tremendous need for capital even after businesses open back up. Is there any additional funding that will be put into that program?
I can take that. From the state level right now, we still are sitting on $3.9 billion of federal money that has not been allocated. Those monies can only be allocated to those that have suffered losses that they can justify from the pandemic. I believe most of those dollars are going to go towards cleaning up some shortfalls in hospitals to start with. They all had some huge losses. We don't have the ability at the state level to print dollars per se, so the only dollars we actually have are federal dollars. So in direct answer to Tim's question, I think that more than likely would have to be a federal initiative that maybe has some dollars come to the state that we can redistribute. I know in discussions I've had with Congressman Reschenstaller that there still is some discussions potentially about other ones, but not right now.
Thank you. And just real quick, George, your mic seems to be going in and out a little bit. So I don't know if you're too far away from the computer or not. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention for, you know, if you want to speak again or answer a question again. So I just wanted you to know that.
I can just be quiet, Tim.
So our next question is from Dan Galbraith. He's the owner of a business in Westmoreland County called The Solutionist. He's a swag guy. He says, just to clarify, realtors are able to fully function with the exception of open houses. And that's a question, then will the offices at the courthouse be open as well?
So I'll say this, under the governor's order, the real estate folks are obviously able to operate, but there was a limit on having open houses. I don't know if chairman of the board, County Commissioner Sean Curtis is on or not, but frankly, the county commissioners, Dan, are probably the best one to answer that about the county offices, unless you guys know. I personally don't.
This is Janice Smarto. We can't hold open houses. We will not be permitted to have open houses.
Yeah, correct. Hi, Janice. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's what the governor's order said. But the question was about the county offices being open. I'm not certain about that.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question comes from Lori Levine. And let me see here. I'm sorry. I skipped over one. This is from Diane Swartz, and she works with the Jeanette Public Library. Her question is general. She just wants to know if we will be voting at public polling locations on June 2nd.
Well, could you repeat the question, please?
Will we be voting at public polling locations on June 2nd?
So I'll take a crack at that. As of right now, as everybody knows, we moved the primary date to June 2nd to get past what we thought might have been the spike in COVID-19 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So at this point, the answer to that question is yes. Could the primary be moved? That's always possible, but at this point, I think that's very unlikely.
I
The
think just in clarifying with what Mike was saying, that in-person voting is planned to move forward, and the county has implemented hygiene practices, and so individuals who want to mail-in voting is an option if you request, but if you want to cast a mail-in or a traditional ballot and go to a polling place, there will be in-person voting, and I know there's going to be some messaging and advertising to explain the hygiene steps that they're taking, but they have procedures in place. So you will be able to vote at in person if you want to as well.
The governor said this is an essential, and therefore it's not even a question. The real question is, if they can't get enough poll workers, will we be combining some polls? And that is something the county will have to tell us. But at the moment, you can vote in person or you can vote by mail, and that's an essential.
Bob, we had talked to one of the fire departments today, and it sounds like there's a couple of ours that are going to combine. Nothing official yet, but there was definitely talk of it, definitely talk happening.
Thank you. Okay, so Lori Levine is the Executive Director of Mental Health America. And she says that she wanted to bring to the audience attention that May is Mental Health Month. The experts and research shows that following pandemics, there are tremendous mental health impact, including depression and suicide. Has there been any future planning or discussion for that?
Hello, how are you doing, Lori? There's been recognition of, and in certain parts and concern, as George touched on the budget process with impacts coming to revenue. I think the importance of our social services, for mental health, was disappointing that the governor had vetoed telemedicine, which would have allowed telemental health, and some of those things are looking to move forward in different ways. I think it's acknowledged, but there is not a line item yet of where that's going to go. And I think I wanted to say the overdose might be 30 or 31 this year to date. Because of Narcan being out there, there hasn't been necessarily a big spike from over there, but the social services of the impacts are really going to be far reaching. I agree with her, and it's going to be a considerable challenge, even in the areas of domestic violence, just because it's tense times for everyone.
Thank you, Eric. Lily Brindle would like to talk about physicians' offices opening and when physician offices will be able to open to visitors to actually come in and discuss services like drug and alcohol services.
Do you want to
read it again, Eric?
Yeah. It's
okay.
Tough timeline-wise.
Yeah. When will physicians' offices be open to visitors coming in to discuss services like drug and alcohol services?
You know what? I don't have a specific date for that. I do know, and I am aware that many physicians' offices, they're working. But what we could do is I'll look to see if we can find a more specific answer, and then I can circle back with you. I don't want to misspeak, but I don't know that there's a prohibition of some of those things, particularly as we're coming into yellow. But if you want to hold that person's question, and then we can follow up outside today.
I will do so.
Yeah, and just on that point, I think Eric's right. As we move to the yellow phase, I think that would be okay. But like Eric said, it's probably better to get an official answer on that.
Okay. I'll mark that down. Scott Harshman is next. He is with the Port of Pittsburgh Commission. And he says, in the past press conference, Secretary Levine said that organized youth sports would not take place until we were in the green phase. Per Representative Brooks' comments today, has that changed? When can youth baseball teams start practicing here in Westmoreland? And is there a plan for contact tracing to take place in Westmoreland County? And if so, who is spearheading it?
That's a whole lot of different questions all in one, but it's very, if you listen to the governor again today, what you hear is the governor, he's not like the Gestapo that says you can't. It's your responsibility is to make sure that it's safe and it's done safely. And if it's in groups of small groups, like a baseball team is definitely under the size of 25. And so, whether it's, the question of if they believe safe means you don't have certain large crowds, he basically leaves a lot of this up to the organization, same as the doctor, same as the dentist. The whole rule is you have to do it safely. And so if you can do it safely, following the guidelines of the federal, then, it's basically something you could do, right? I think, we listen to words and we overanalyze. If you listen to him and watch him and what he says, it's doing it safely. And if you can do that, now kids don't want, if parents don't want their kids to play, they don't have to play. This is not a mandatory type thing, but I believe that in listening to him, this is what he said. And he didn't specifically say, and neither is the writings on yellow specifically talk about every item, but they do say that you can't do the indoor and you can't do hair cutting, but it's pretty open after that, as long as you believe you can do it safely and you set up those safeguards and your quantity controls are well handled, and it's outdoors.
Thank you, Representative Brooks.
And if we want to answer the second part of that question, Courtney, the contact tracing.
Yeah, do you want me to repeat that for you, Mike?
Was he just asking who would be the point person or how that was going to be rolled out? Is that?
Yeah, basically, is there a plan for contact tracing for Westmoreland County? And if so, who will be spearheading it?
So that's a great question. And I got to tell you, I think I have major concerns with some of the discussions surrounding contact tracing. The governor rolled out an idea of a Commonwealth Coronavirus Civilian Corps a couple of days ago. And, he's hoping to use some federal dollars to fund this civilian corps to do this contact tracing. I firmly believe there needs to be legislative approval given for this. We're going to have those discussions over the next several weeks. But his plan, Scott, I think Scott Harshman asked this question. His plan is to have this up and running and in place by this fall. And again, when asked by reporters, does he need legislative approval? He said he didn't think he did, and he thought he could appropriate federal stimulus dollars. George Dunbar could better speak to that. I would argue that he doesn't have that authority, and that frankly we should have a very robust discussion about what that looks like before he moves forward with his administration on that issue.
Yeah, and I don't know if the microphone's working any better, but Mike is right that there are no funds for it, and the 3.9 billion, I think, is what he wants to access some of those dollars. I think it's kind of ironic. The whole thing, though, is that he wants to use unemployed people because this can give them something to do, is to go out and do the contact tracing. But the reason they're unemployed is because he didn't allow businesses to open. It's such a vicious cycle that we're in. So he makes rules to make people unemployed, and then is going to give them something. These people just want to go to work and stuff. So hopefully we're going to need a better plan for contact tracing, but it keeps moving the goalpost.
And in particular, I mean, I echo support for what Mike and George are saying there. When our hospital system is really hurting and we have the ambulance personnel, to create a new subset of government employees it's ironic, CCCP reminds me of like the old Russian logo, even the task of what they may be informed to do, where when we talk about that large amount of resources could be still achieve the goal, this public health safety goal, by using community hospitals and our existing health systems that are really hurting, so it's a controversial thing, and it was another example of a sudden announcement where you're seeing this and saying, really? So I do agree that there's going to be a good bit of discussion moving forward, and not that we don't want to have the ability to implement new technology and for our medical profession to be able to have the resources. I just don't know that we want to create a completely new arm of government to send those resources.
I agree with you guys, fellow reps. I agree completely.
Thank you, guys. And George, yes, your microphone was better that time, so thank you. Tim Phillips has asked of COVID-19 repercussions in deaths of despair are expected to escalate. Research indicates for every 1% increase in employment, we can expect at least 3.6% increase in overdose deaths or OD deaths. These deaths of despair will have terrible factors on our communities. We can't afford to have reductions in services and funding for behavioral health. What is being done to increase resources for us?
Hey, look, I'm just gonna, again, George is kind of our expert when it comes to appropriations, but I'm just gonna throw a comment out, and then I know Eric Nelson is also very good at this side of government. So here's the problem, and let me just be very blunt, because as we're starting to look at what the budget's going to look like next year, if people aren't working, if they're not, if they're not paying the PIT, and if they don't have money to buy anything, they're not paying the sales tax, that's the vast majority of where our revenue comes from. So, we're going to be in a real pickle going into the next fiscal year, because, we're hurting financially. And George can speak to this better, but 7 weeks ago, we were sitting with about an $800 million surplus in the general fund. Now we're looking at almost, correct me if I'm wrong, George, almost a $5 billion shortfall before July 1 for this fiscal year.
It's projected to be that, yeah.
We are in a bad spot. The only way to correct this is to get people back to work and do so as safely as possible, obviously, but get people back to work, having them supporting their families, paying their bills, and frankly, purchasing goods in our economy. So, it's going to be a very difficult year, I think, for state government, of course, all those folks that state government supports. I'll turn it over to George or Eric.
I think it's going to get very, very serious, because and George will be able to touch on we know that pie is getting smaller, the amount of how much it's going to have to constrict. And, politics, that Mike says it best, politics is a full contact sport. There are some very powerful entities at the state level that lobby for money. And I think there's going to be a pretty serious battle between education, which is 42% of the pie, social services, which is 40% of the pie, and the need to look for how we're going to prioritize. I think, and I haven't heard a single person dispute what Tim is talking about, where the despair and the increase and the cost of people, it's going to be very real. How it comes to the line item of the budget it's going to be difficult, because everyone agrees there's going to be less, and there's, you know, there's going to be some hard days ahead. George, you can hit on the money side of it.
Yeah, and Mike and Eric are right. We are in a difficult situation. The thing is, we don't know right now how difficult the situation is because we deferred collection of all our taxes in July. So once our revenues come in July, and portions of the state are reopened, we can have a better idea of where we're at. So what you're going to see is a budget. We're going to try to do some type of short-term budget until we can really figure out where we're at. It's going to be, so we're not going to go and make those decisions while we're still in the crisis. We'll be able to make those decisions a little bit further down the road when maybe we have a better idea of where our needs are going to be, specifically to some of the things you mentioned. The options are the same options that there's always been in any budget. You either have to reduce expenditures and or increase revenues via tax increases. I don't think there's any appetite at all for tax increases for everything that everybody's gone through. The last thing they need is an increased tax bill. So there's going to have to be some contraction somewhere. Part of the issue we have to go through is a lot of the funds that we've received from the federal government comes with ties. For instance, there was a lot of money that we've gotten for education. Now, part of that means that we have to at least fund education to the same level it was funded, or we can't utilize those funds. That's not only for K through 12, that's for higher ed as well. So the areas of where you can contract get smaller, and where you can find some expenditures to cut, it's very difficult. There's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made, and everybody's going to feel some pain.
I just want to circle back with another group that we didn't mention, and that's our senior community, our nursing homes and assisted living. 67%, I think, of our state fatalities have been in that subset. And I think it's going to be recognized in that community that, you know, a portion of these resources are going to need to shore up so we can get ready for the fall. You know, I agree with George. He knows the numbers, and that's going to be, I think, moving forward. Those senior nursing homes, assisted living facilities in those areas, we're going to start to hear from them more and more because of, as we look at where the impact was greatest, they were really, you know, they were the epicenter for loss, and that's going to require some changes.
And I think there could be some positive effects once all is said and done, because there could be some right sizing of government throughout this as well. I mean, when I say shared sacrifices, that means we're going to have to make sacrifices ourselves at the state level of reducing staffing and things like that, and salaries and whatnot. So maybe there'll be some right sizing that goes from there as well.
I just want to bring up, we have 19 more questions, and we are ending the webinar for 4:15 or 4:30, and we are going to send out you to the attendees for your contact information, and we will send out the other questions.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, so moving right along, I have a question from Chris at Silvis Landscaping. His question is, with the high unemployment rates expected, how can we ensure we will not have an impact on our much needed H-2B workers in the future?
Anybody want to take that, or I can
go for it, Nelson. I don't know what an H-2B worker is, to be honest.
He's talking about the workers from other countries.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wasn't positive.
It is. I don't know. That's a, you know, those levels are set at the federal level for what they're going to approve or disapprove. You know, part of the reality of the need of those H-2B workers is because a portion of our workforce may not be willing to work for $15 an hour as hard. And I think that's what Silva starts at, somewhere in that range, where they, if they're still having the same struggles where they can't get people to hire and they're backfilling those. Again, the federal level is the one, they're the ones who set those limits. I do think it's going to be a reset of the economy, and there may be an opportunity for them to get some more workers that they'd be able to use longer through the year. Because with landscaping being life essential, if you're a family member and you know you need to consistently work, I think there is going to be a change in areas, skilled trades, skilled professions, because if you're going to get back into it, you don't want to get shut down again, you know. So unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer because that's out of our purview. But the willingness to work hard, and potentially people want higher stability, there may be a chance that they're going to be able to gain some employment share.
Thanks, Representative Nelson. The next question is from James Creenan, who is a attorney within the county, and he would like to know, prior to the pandemic, did the Commonwealth Department of Health have a plan to deal with a pandemic? And also, is the Department of Health required to have such a plan? Anyone?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if you guys do or not, but we can get an answer to you.
Yes, specifically for, I would say, and in defense, even though I'm frustrated with some of the decisions that have transpired after we've been into it on our way out, plans from the Asian flu to a variety of different aspects of things, I think have been in place with the department. I don't know that there was a specific plan for this type of situation, but PEMA has really, I mean, and Bud Mertz is as an example of that. Both the counties and you know, there have been things in place. They did not anticipate, I think, the shutdown of the economy on top of some of those things. But we can specifically ask. I still haven't seen an actual plan, so I don't know that there was one. And Representative Reese touched on House leadership, you know, because he's a member of leadership. They really placed an amendment that would require the governor's administration to publish a produced plan, and there was a good bit of pushback on it. So that may help.
Thank you. The next one is from Jason McCabe, and he works in engineering and consulting. And his question is, what efforts can the state take to upgrade transportation and infrastructure projects, which were critical before the COVID shutdowns, that will promote employment, job growth, and remedy the existing deficiencies?
Jason, one of the issues we have there is also comes down to financing. One of the positive aspects of the COVID crisis is the gas price has gone down dramatically. The problem with that, though, is that's where we're getting our funding to do our road projects, is from the gas tax, which is a percentage of what we pay for gas. So there's a lot less funds available than we anticipated. So many of the projects that we had on our books aren't going to happen this year. We're trying to work through it right now to find out exactly where we're at, but we also have lost some valuable time as well, because asphalt plants are only open from April 1st to Thanksgiving, and for the first month and a half, no work was going on. So there's a lot of catching up we need to do with no money to do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Our next question is regarding PennDOT. Lad, who is in the insurance industry, is asking if PennDOT facilities are allowed to open, and what about the testing sites for state licenses?
They can open under yellow.
Okay.
I do know that we got some announcement today that three of them opened up today, I believe, and I'm sure we'll have more opening up next Friday. As far as testing, I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is from Mary Beth from J Bell's Auto Corral. It's used cars and repair services. And she's asking, the PPP loan was great to provide money to individuals. This does allow employers to cover payroll and certain business expenses, but the business owners that were forced to close still lost revenue and have personal bills to cover. Is there any plan to help the small businesses and their owners?
I'm hearing from that businesses every day.
Do you want to touch on a little of the PPP? I know you touched on that earlier. And then there's the PUA, that is out there for small employers. You're more familiar with the state level resources that might be available, but as far as for business loss, there was a good bit of debate, but not necessarily a solution as to, because I think it was clarified that it was not reimbursable under business interruption insurance, and there was some battles back and forth. It was determined that the pandemic did not fall, I think, under a lot of business interruption insurance, and there's not been identified that I'm aware of a backfill for those small business owners. As frustrating as it is, I don't want to misrepresent it, and I don't know that we have seen something. And, gentlemen?
I think Eric's right. Other than the PUA, which obviously allows you to file for unemployment as a business owner, which is of course new. There's going to be a lot of discussion, but nothing more specific than that I've seen.
I mean, my greatest concern is in hearing from businesses that have, because surrounding states opened sooner or remained open within that business type, Pennsylvania employers lost contracts to supply to other operating businesses in other states. And to me, it's a whole second tier of consequences that we haven't even seen yet. When I'm listening to business owners, they're saying, well, I could maybe bring my people back, but I don't have enough work to bring them all back because their contracts have been taken over by competitors in other states. I'm very concerned about that.
Thank you.
George, do you have anything?
The only thing PUA, we talked about the payroll protection plan, which are all federal dollars coming through. As far as Pennsylvania, like I said, we have the $3.9 billion that we haven't allocated. I don't see an allocation out for business interruption or anything like that coming. Maybe there'll be some type of tax incentives we can offer down the road, but right now we're in a budget crunch on top of everything else. I understand the need. Believe me, I understand the need and empathize with the situation. And we are hopeful that the federal dollars, maybe we can find some more federal dollars to flex down.
Thanks. Okay, I think I'm just going to give two more questions because we are kind of winding down, and the other ones that we did not get to, I will get those to you guys, and hopefully we can get them answered and then back out to the people who asked them so that they have an answer. But so the last two questions, this is from Teresa Bachman with the Palace Theater. She wants to know, is catering permitted at indoor events under 25 people, since restaurants cannot yet have dine-in services, not in a private home, but at an event center? So under 25 people at an event center, can it be catered?
Well, I'm going to jump in and they may follow me up with facts. I'm just going to speak under emotion and covering the yellow. I think that our small business owners are going to be able to need to use and apply creativity in order to get Pennsylvania back up and running and follow safe guidelines. If there isn't a specific prohibition against it, then having catered food that is going to be provided with, maybe you're not washing those dishes and cutlery, you're going to throw it away. Maybe you're not sitting as close as you once were, but if there isn't a prohibition, I would say there's no reason even to ask that question. It's a yes. In a safe, responsible manner, because those caterers also carry a liability that if they acted in an irresponsible manner and there was an event, just like they would if they served bad chicken salad, they're carrying a responsibility that they recognize.
Thank you. So then I'll just leave it with this question, and then I'll follow up with just some information. But Brandon Kale is asking, it seems that we won't move beyond the green phase until there is a vaccine. Many are concerned that this vaccine, among others, will be mandatory. Where do each of the representatives stand on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. Hey, Brandon. Hope you're doing well. Hope your family's well. So look, I'm one of those guys that the vaccine makes a lot of sense to me. And if it's tested and our medical experts say it's safe, I have no problem with people getting that. It makes sense. That said, I'm not one that ever supported in my legislative career forcing people into vaccines if they don't want them. So me personally, I will not be supportive of mandating vaccines. But that's where I'm at.
I will follow up and second what Mike said. I got all my kids vaccinated, but I don't believe that we have to mandate everybody to have to do this. I think it'd be a good idea, but I'm not one to make a vote on something like that.
Agree with what George just said. All my kids were vaccinated as well, and I do not support mandating it.
I believe that what's going to happen is major sports events, baseball, they'll start without crowds in the summer. And if a vaccine is found, then that will be something that will allow people to take a vaccine. They won't have to. I don't believe in mandates, but it'll give the opportunity then for these larger venues, probably in September or so, to open, same as the football season. And people will choose whether to go to the event or not go to the event. But knowing the vaccine's out there will be a real positive in allowing those events to happen.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm a believer in that personal choice. I think if there is a vaccine and families want to be able to get it, I also think the ability to have antibody testing, because I believe that, and here the number of people are quite confident that they maybe already had it and had it cycled through. I think the benefit of a vaccine for some families is the way they're going to go, but I would not support legislation that would mandate a vaccine. And also, I think as a delegation, we touched earlier, because there's not just vaccine, but along with that, that contact tracing or mandated participation through that coronavirus core that Representative Reese was talking about. There's some very concerning civil liberty issues that lay ahead.
All right. Thank you, guys. So I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here. We've gone a little bit over our hour. I want to thank, all of the state reps, Representative Brooks, Dunbar, Nelson, DeVanzo, and Reese for doing this and taking the time out of your schedules to talk with our chamber members in the county. We really appreciate it. I know I'm also getting some comments here in my chat box asking if there will be another event like this. Everyone enjoyed it. It was informational. So I don't know if there will be another one, but we can definitely talk to the reps and see if they have time, or we can set something up. But for those of you whose question I did not get to today, I'm sorry. Just time is a concern. You can email if you have a question and didn't get it answered. All of those, I do have them. I will send them to the reps, the state reps, to get them to answer them, to see if we can get some answers for you. But if you did not get to ask a question and have a question, please feel free to email myself or the chamber. My email address is Courtney@westmorelandchamber.com. Or if it's easier, you can just email your question to info@westmorelandchamber.com, and we will get those questions and get them over to the state reps so that they can answer and get you a little bit more information on some of your thoughts and concerns. Also, as I said in the beginning, we did record this session, this meeting, and I will have that. So if anyone would like a copy of this recording, please feel free to reach out to myself. Again, it's Courtney@westmorelandchamber.com, or you can call the chamber office and we can get that to you. So with that, gentlemen, Chad, state reps, if you have anything to say to close it out, I'm going to hand it over to you. But thank you and have a good weekend, and tell all of your wives and mothers Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, we thank the state reps in our county for doing so much to impact our businesses. And we are going to give this trophy to you. Yeah, I mean, we are going to give it. We have to laugh sometimes. Well, we thank you very much for your effort and for your positive impact on our economy in the county and the Commonwealth.
Thank you, guys. We're here to help, and we want to make sure that Westmoreland County is successful now, and even getting through this pandemic. So we're here to help.
Thanks for putting it together.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sure. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.